On the way to deliver art to the Hamptons, my husband went pale and whispered, "Pull over now." I was confused. Why? Just pull over, please. I trusted him, and it saved us. When I found out why, I never saw my parents the same way again. The plan was simple. Drive out to East Hampton on a Saturday morning, deliver a few wrapped paintings to a private collector, maybe grab lunch somewhere with a view, and be back in Manhattan by evening. The twins could do homework in the car, Marcus could scout locations for his documentary, and I could do my parents a favor without it interfering with my actual job. It was supposed to be normal, borderline boring, which honestly felt like a luxury. I was driving our Range Rover, mostly because Marcus gets carsick on winding roads, and partly because I like being in control when we're transporting art. The twins, Jake and Maya, were 12 and at that perfect age where they're old enough to entertain themselves, but young enough to not constantly need the bathroom. They had their tablets, their earbuds, and a bag of those overpriced organic crackers that somehow make me feel like a better parent. It was fine. Not magical, not stressful, just fine until he said it. Pull over now. I didn't react immediately, or I did, but not seriously. I glanced at him like he'd suggested we stop for ice cream at 9 a.m. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared out the passenger window at the Long Island suburbs flowing past us. Then he said, "Please, Emily, just pull over." That's when I knew something was wrong. Marcus doesn't do panic. His default setting is thoughtful contemplation, occasionally shifting to mild concern. I've seen him calmly troubleshoot equipment failures during shoots that would have sent me into a spiral. So when his voice got that edge, that quiet urgency, I took it seriously. I pulled into a rest stop, one of those generic places with gas pumps and a Dunkin' Donuts that could have been anywhere in America. The moment I parked, his shoulders dropped like he'd been bracing against something heavy. "Okay," I said, turning to face him. "What's going on?" He shook his head. "Just sit here for a minute." Sit here and do what? Think. The twins were still absorbed in their screens, completely oblivious to whatever tension was building in the front seat. Marcus unbuckled his seatbelt and got out without explanation. I watched him walk to the back of the car, his filmmaker's eyes scanning everything like he was framing a shot. After a moment, he opened the hatch. I couldn't see what he was doing from where I sat, so I just waited, my anxiety building with every second. My hands were getting sweaty against the steering wheel. My heart was doing that thing where it feels too big for my chest. He closed the hatch and came back to my window. "Can you come out here?" "Why?" "I need you to see something." He didn't sound scared exactly, just deadly serious. Like he was about to show me a terminal diagnosis. I got out, telling the kids I'd be right back. He led me to the rear of the car and opened the hatch again. The 3 wrapped paintings were there, just as my parents had loaded them. Rectangular packages in brown paper and bubble wrap, secured with tape. They looked exactly like what they were supposed to be, art being transported safely. Marcus pointed to one of them. "Look at this corner." I looked. A small tear in the wrapping had revealed a glimpse of canvas underneath. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then the recognition hit me like cold water. It was a corner of a Monet. Not a reproduction, not a study, but what looked like an actual piece from his Water Lilies series. The brushwork, the color saturation, the way the paint caught the light, it was either authentic or the most perfect forgery I'd ever seen. "That's impossible," I whispered. He carefully pulled back more of the wrapping. More of the painting was revealed, and with it, more impossibility. This particular Monet was supposed to be in a private collection in Switzerland. I knew because I'd written about it in a catalog essay 2 years ago. "How did you know to look?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, still staring at the exposed canvas. "Something your father said when we were loading these. He kept talking about how this was going to solve everything, how they wouldn't have to worry about money anymore. And the way your mother was acting." I thought back to that morning. My parents had been unusually cheerful, almost giddy. My mother, Victoria, who usually treated any request for help like a personal imposition, had been practically bouncing on her toes. My father, Robert, had been making jokes about early retirement. They said these were personal pieces. I said, more to myself than to Marcus. Moving them for a friend who was relocating. When has your mother ever moved anything for a friend? He was right. Victoria Castellano didn't do favors. She collected them. With shaking hands, I carefully unwrapped more of the painting. It was definitely from the Water Lily series, probably worth 8 figures if it was authentic. If it was authentic and legal. We need to check the others, I said. The second painting made my knees weak. A Van Gogh self-portrait that I was absolutely certain belonged to a museum in Amsterdam. The third was a Picasso from his blue period that had been sold at auction just 6 months ago to an anonymous buyer. I stood there in a rest stop parking lot, looking at what had to be $50 million worth of stolen art, and felt my entire life rearrange itself around this moment. They're forgeries, I said, because the alternative was too devastating to consider. They have to be forgeries. But even as I said it, I knew I was wrong. The brushwork was too perfect, the aging too authentic, the canvas preparation too consistent with the periods. These weren't copies. They were the real thing. And somehow my parents had them. Emily, Marcus said gently, we need to call the police. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. No, we can't. Not yet. I wasn't protecting my parents. I was protecting myself, my career, my children. If these paintings were reported stolen and found in my car, my name would be connected to this forever. Art crime investigations move slowly and publicly. Even if I was cleared, the suspicion would linger. Galleries don't hire curators with question marks in their past. We take them back, I said.
Right now.
We take them back and figure out what's happening. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood the stakes. We rewrapped the paintings carefully and drove back to the city in complete silence. The twins asked a few questions about why we'd turned around, but they were easily distracted by promises of pizza for lunch. The drive back felt eternal. Every police car we passed made my chest tighten. Every call on my phone, and there were several from my parents, went unanswered. By the time we reached their Upper West Side apartment, I had mentally prepared myself for the worst. But I wasn't prepared for the truth. My parents weren't surprised to see us. They were disappointed. What happened? My mother asked, not even pretending to be concerned about our sudden return. Was there a problem with the delivery? I set the paintings down in their foyer, still wrapped. You tell me. My father shifted uncomfortably, but my mother just sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. Sit down, Emily, she said. Let me explain. And she did. For the past 2 years, while I'd been building my reputation at the gallery, while I'd been turning down their requests for help with connections and sales, they'd been building something else. A network of forgers, dealers, and buyers who specialized in moving high-end reproductions to collectors who didn't ask too many questions. It started small. My mother would create studies of famous works, paintings that were similar enough to be convincing, but different enough to be legal. Robert would handle the sales, using his old connections from his art dealer days. But small wasn't enough. It never was with them. They started creating exact replicas, using techniques and materials that could fool all but the most sophisticated authentication processes. They told buyers that their daughter, the Manhattan curator, had verified the provenance. They used my name, my reputation, my professional relationships as collateral for their lies. We weren't hurting anyone, my mother said, as if that explained everything. These people have money to burn. They want bragging rights, not museum pieces. But these aren't reproductions, I said. These are real. My parents exchanged a look. Sometimes, my father said carefully, opportunities present themselves. A collector needs to liquidate quickly, or someone needs to move pieces without paperwork, and we facilitate that. Stolen art. They were moving stolen art and using my name to legitimize it. How long? I asked. How long what? How long have you been using my reputation to commit federal crimes? My mother bristled. Don't be so dramatic. We're not committing crimes. We're providing services. That's when my sister Sophia emerged from the back bedroom, paint still on her hands, looking like she'd been crying. Tell her the rest, Sophia said quietly. There was more. The FBI had been investigating art theft rings operating out of New York. My name had come up in connection with several pieces that had been sold with questionable authentication. Not as a suspect, but as someone whose professional opinion had allegedly been used to verify works. They haven't contacted you directly because they're still building their case, Sophia said. But it's coming. I felt like I was watching my life disintegrate in real time. How could you do this to me? I asked. How could you risk everything I've worked for? My mother's expression hardened. Everything you've worked for? What about everything we've given you? The education, the connections, the opportunities? You think you got where you are on merit alone. There it was. The underlying resentment, the sense that my success somehow belonged to them. We asked for help, my father added. We asked you to use your connections, to help us sell some pieces, to introduce us to collectors. You said no. You said it would be unethical. Because it would be. So, we found another way. The logic was breathtaking in its narcissism. Because I wouldn't help them bend the rules, they decided to break them entirely and drag me down with them. I stood up. We're done. Emily, no, we're done. Don't call me. Don't contact the gallery. Don't use my name for anything ever again. My mother smiled that sharp, cold smile I remembered from childhood. You'll change your mind. You always do when you need something. I walked out without another word. That should have been the end, but of course it wasn't. 3 days later, I got a call from my gallery director. The FBI had been asking questions about my involvement in authentication services. Nothing serious, just routine inquiries, but enough to raise eyebrows. 2 days after that, my assistant mentioned that a journalist from Art News had called asking about my family's art business. The scandal was already building, even if the charges hadn't been filed yet. That night, I sat Marcus down and said something I never thought I'd say. We need to leave New York. He didn't argue. He'd seen enough to understand that staying meant watching my career slowly dissolve under suspicion and innuendo. Santa Fe? He asked. He'd been offered a documentary project there months earlier, something about contemporary Native American artists. I'd talked him out of it because I didn't want to leave the gallery. Santa Fe? I agreed. We didn't announce our departure. We just left. Quietly, efficiently, like we were escaping something. Which I suppose we were. The twins adapted faster than I expected. New schools, new friends, new landscapes. Marcus threw himself into his documentary work. And I did something I hadn't done in years. I started over. I opened a small gallery specializing in emerging Southwestern artists. Real artists creating real work with real integrity. No famous names, no investment potential, just authentic creative expression. It was everything my old life hadn't been. 6 months later, I got an email from Sophia. The subject line read, "They need help." I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. My parents had been arrested in a federal sting operation. The story made the front page of the art section in the Times. Victoria and Robert Castellano, once respected figures in the New York art world, charged with conspiracy to sell stolen artwork, money laundering, and fraud. The email was desperate. They needed money for lawyers. They needed someone to post bond. They needed me to come back and explain to everyone that this was all a misunderstanding. I read it twice, then hit reply. I already saved myself once. I won't be your safety net again. That was 6 months ago. I heard through the art world grapevine that they took plea deals. 2 years each, plus restitution. Sophia got probation in exchange for testimony. The gallery in Santa Fe is thriving. The twins love their new school. Marcus won an award for his documentary. And I haven't had to translate guilt into action in a very long time. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel bad about walking away so completely, about not visiting them in prison or taking their calls or helping with legal fees. But then I remember standing in that rest stop parking lot, looking at $50 million worth of stolen art that could have destroyed my children's future, and I know I made the right choice. Some people collect art to show the world who they are. Others create it to hide who they've become. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from both the collection and the creator. You tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments, and if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe.